My name is Randy Barker. I work in Student Health and Counseling Services here at UWS. I've been in the mental health field for about 10 years. All my experience has been in college mental health. And one of the things and one of the honors that I get opportunity to work with students on is a lot in regards to performance anxiety. And that's where I look at test anxiety. It falls under that performance anxiety. I've worked with individuals in regards to athletics, right? And obviously that anxiety at times negatively affecting their performance. Musicians, right? Same thing with their performance. And I've worked with numerous students surrounding, obviously, test anxiety, right? Where their anxiety negatively affects their performance when it comes to test taking. I've worked with individuals preparing for their GREs, right? Their LSATs, MedCats, all the different exams that they need to take to get into their profession that they've worked very hard to get to. And then obviously at times the anxiety can negatively affect them getting into that profession. Right? So one of the things that I'm going to go over is a lot of different things that, right, that can be used to obviously help them perform at a higher level. Right? And a lot of times, and we'll talk about it, it's not due to, right, a lack of knowledge, right? It's at times not due to a lack of preparation, yet at times it's due to some of the things that we'll cover that obviously don't allow them to perform at the level that they want to perform at, okay? So anytime we talk about test anxiety or change, I like to go over about 4 or 5 just principles, right? And we're going to be covering these principles throughout the workshop. The first is that any difference can make a big difference. So today we're going to be talking about several little things that you can do that could have an impact, right? And any difference, especially when it comes to test taking, can make a big difference. It could be the difference between a C and a B from an A, right? Getting into a program, not getting into a program. So again, when we talk about this, is that any difference can make a big difference. The next is every experience is valuable. And I like to look at this, especially when it comes to test taking, is a lot of times we can learn from the things that we do, right? We can learn from tests, right, of how to do things differently, how to do things better, right? So a lot of times is always looking at every experience as a valuable experience. You have more resources than you realize. I think it's a fair statement to say that everyone in here has many more resources, skills, and talents than they're even aware of. Right? So part of the job is, within this workshop, is to start to maybe rediscover those or realize that you have those things within yourselves, and then how to utilize them more. Okay? Change behaviors first, feelings will follow. Today we're going to be talking a lot about behavioral change, little things that you can do. Right? And part of it is at times people get into the habit of saying, well, I have to feel these things before I'm going to make those behavioral changes, right? And part of it is, we know, and research has shown, is that at times we have to change the behavior and then those feelings will follow. And that's difficult at times. You get more what you focus on. And we're going to talk about the power of that. And you get more what you focus on, good or bad, right? And part of it is we're going to be talking about what are some of the things that may be more helpful to focus on. And lastly, we need to focus on things that we can control. There are certain things when it comes to testing, right, that we don't have control over, right? But we do have control over a lot of things, and that's where we're going to focus on today. Test anxiety, we know that most students experience some level of test anxiety. And research has shown some anxiety is more beneficial, right? It's helpful, it's useful. It can be obviously motivating, and it actually at times helps you perform at a higher level. It becomes problematic, right, when it's too high. So you have the certain amount that is good, yet when it gets above that, that's when it starts to become problematic. The other thing is too low, not having any, at times can be problematic also, right? Lacking the motivation to really do things. So really the key is finding whatever level is right for you, and that varies individual to individual. I have a picture here and its flow. And flow was discovered by a positive psychologist by the last name, Csikszentmihalyi. He's done a lot of research surrounding this state, this peak performance state, and he studied a lot of different people, musicians, rock climbers, surgeons, right? All surrounding performance. And what he found was the amount of stress, anxiety, it can't be too low, because when it's low, we're not performing at our best. And he also was able to identify when it's too high, you're not going to get into that flow, that peak state. So once again, it's really about finding what level is right for you. And when it's too low, we need to find ways of increasing that. The majority of time, especially when the people that I'm working with, it's usually too high, and we need to find ways of bringing it down. What is it? Right? Test anxiety occurs when you believe that you've been confronted by a possible threat or danger. Real or imagined? The response that we have then is what? It's the fight. I'm getting the heck out of here. Right? Fight. Here we go. I got to, prepare for this. Or the last one is freeze. And when you feel anxious, your body obviously becomes aroused and you experience all those different symptoms of the anxiety. One of the things that I hear a lot when it comes to test anxiety is going blank, right? And that fight, flight, or freeze response causes the blood to flow away from the information processing part of our brain. And it goes to those other parts of our body, such as, right, our legs and arms. What it also does is it narrow and constricts, right? It narrow constricts our vision, which is helpful and useful if we are in danger. But when we're taking a test, that's not the state that we need to be in. Okay? When we become narrow or strict, or where we get to the point where we're going blank, isn't the helpful, useful state that we need to be in. Where does it come from? Like most human behavior, it's usually learned. Could have happened sometime when you were young. Someone may have put a lot of pressure on you. Parent, teacher, whoever that may be. Right? You may have failed the test in the past and received a lot of negative feedback from teachers and parents. And those produces some of those triggers. It could be external, right? For some people, you walk into a test site and just seeing the test site produces some of that. It could be internal, those internal triggers of feeling a certain sensation within your body, or cognitively, having some of those thoughts that can trigger some of those anxieties. This is the test anxiety cycle. I'll go over this. Test as a threatening event, right? That's how they perceive it. Real or imagined. What happens is the anxiety lowers their performance. When it lowers their performance, they have a poor outcome, and then that reinforces those feelings for the next test. Okay, so that's the test anxiety cycle that I see, and one of the goals is to change that cycle. And we're going to talk about different ways of doing that today. The good news is, right, is that we can choose a different approach to dealing with these things. First, we need to be aware of it, but by being aware and realizing that, we can choose a different approach. And the goal of this workshop is to show you different ways of doing that today. We know the definition of insanity, right, is doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different result, right? And I see that a lot with people, right, is they continue to do the same thing, they prepare the same way, they go into the test sites, they do everything the same way and thinking that they're going to get a different result, right? So part of it is making change, doing things differently. So today we're going to go over some of these things. The first is I'm going to talk to you about just basic test-taking tips. Some of you may have already know these, but I think it's very important that we go over these things because, again, any difference can make a big difference. I think when it comes to test taking too, we need to be very aware of our attitude when it comes to test taking. We need to have a certain mindset. We're going to go over the mindset, the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And then our beliefs. Our beliefs have a significant impact on the way that we think, feel, and behave. Okay, so we're going to kind of talk about our belief system when it comes to test taking. We're going to also talk about a test-taking stance. When you go into a test, making sure that you have a stance, a way of kind of approaching it and dealing with it. And then we're going to talk about some of these coping strategies that you can use when you start to feel that anxiety start to increase. And then we're also going to talk about mental rehearsal. Part of it is when I work with athletes or other people, in regards to their performance, mental rehearsal is very important. Very important, right? Athletes use it all the time. There's research showing that what we vividly imagine, the brain doesn't know the difference between what we vividly imagine and actually doing, right? So part of it is important to mentally rehearse the way we want to perform taking a test. Usually we're unconsciously aware that we usually practice visualizing what we don't want to happen, which then reinforces that. So we're going to talk about different ways of doing that. Let's just talk about the basic tips to reduce it. First and foremost, the things that I'm going to talk about aren't going to be helpful if you don't prepare. The biggest thing is making sure that you're prepared. Preparation, preparation, preparation. Review, review, review. Making sure that you're doing those things. And by doing that, it reduces the anxiety, plain and simple, if you feel prepared. If you don't feel prepared and you haven't studied, the anxiety will increase. The biggest thing, foremost, preparation and review. Second of all, you need to continue to eat healthy. A lot of times I hear individuals that they're saying, well, I wake up, I go to a test and I ask, well, what did you eat that day? Well, I haven't eaten, or they tend to kind of go to the energy drinks, the soda, right? Those things that aren't going to obviously help your performance, right? When people become stressed, they tend to reach to things that aren't the healthiest for them. Right? So I always tell people it's important that you wake up on test day, you make sure that you eat as healthy as possible, right? And you need to go in there feeling good. Get plenty of sleep the night before. There's tons of research out there right now on sleep and the importance of it, especially when it comes to performance enhancement. I hear a lot of times people saying, well, I stay up really late, or I pull an all-nighter, right? That's not going to help performance, and it is not going to help in regards to the anxiety levels. It actually produces more. We become much more sensitive to things, especially in regards to moods, when we're not getting proper sleep. The research has shown people that are sleep deprived, right, when they hop into a car, it's very similar to driving under the influence. So kind of the way that I look at that is that you're not getting proper sleep and you're going to take a test, right, you're taking the test under the influence. So sleep is vital. Making sure that that night before you're getting as much sleep as you can. Moderate pace when studying, I always tell people too, take breaks. A lot of times people say, well, you know, they study for long periods of time. The research has shown, right, taking breaks can be very helpful and useful and can lower that anxiety too. Avoid caffeine and alcohol. So especially alcohol the night before, right? Alcohol does negatively affect the sleep cycle. So again, knowing that, you should avoid it. And I see a lot of times people that struggle with test anxiety right beside themselves is they got those huge energy drinks. Avoid it. Now people that are used to drinking coffee, right, drink your normal amount, don't drink any more. Stay away from last minute cramming. I see a lot of individuals, they get to the test site and all of a sudden I see them pulling out stuff and they're starting to try and cram and get as much information in as possible, and at times that can be confusing and can obviously trigger some of that anxiety. So I always tell people is do your study and get to the test site, leave your stuff alone. There's no use to try and get in some last minute cramming. Plan to arrive to the location early. Don't feel rushed. Right? So you get there, make sure that you're getting there on time, you're getting to, sit in a place that you feel comfortable, right? You do not want to get there late where you're flying in and not sitting where you're comfortable and feeling rushed. Get there in plenty of time. Okay. Lastly, avoid classmates that are anxious. Anxiety is contagious. Right? So at times you'll see that if there's certain individuals that also struggle with anxiety, right? Avoid them. Avoid them, okay? Kind of get there, stay to yourself. We're going to talk about some other things that you could do when you get to the test site that would be more helpful and useful, okay? So again, stay away from those individuals because at times, right, that anxiety is going to be contagious. Not only that, but they're going to be cramming. You're going to be asking questions, and if something comes up where you don't know, right? That's when the anxiety starts. Let's talk about your attitude, your mindset, and your beliefs and self-image. First is your attitude has a significant impact on the way that you're going to approach test taking. And you're responsible for that. You have control over that. Right? If you're going to go into a test with a bad attitude and not really feeling good about it, it's going to have a significant impact on your performance. So really making sure as much as possible you're bringing that positive attitude. Now, this is what we do know about humans is we have this negativity bias within us. It's easier to kind of be negative than it is to be positive. Right? But I think when it comes to test taking, we really need to be consciously aware of what type of attitude are we bringing. Making sure that we're bringing in, that positive attitude, being as optimistic as possible. Talk about fixed and growth mindset. Carol Dweck, who is a Stanford psychologist, has written a book called Mindset, and she's done a lot of research on it when it comes to performance. Individuals with a fixed growth mindset believe that there's nothing that they can really do about it. It's I'm rather good or I'm not at a certain subject area, right? And if I'm not good, there's nothing that I could do. There's no amount of studying or anything else. This is what it's fixed, right? They get a test, they do poorly on it. Right? There's nothing I can do about it. They put it back in their backpack and never look at it again. And they're not inclined to really say, well, I'm going to put in more effort because why would I? There's nothing that I can do. I can't improve in this area anyway. People with a growth mindset are totally opposite, right? They look at something that they can continue to get better at. They're going to continue to work at. If they don't do well on an exam or a test, they look at it and see, what can I learn from this? Right? They look at it as a valuable experience. How can I work harder? Knowing that they are capable of making change, they are capable of getting better. So I think it's important when we think about test taking, that we go in with a growth mindset. Our beliefs and our self-image. A lot of times when I work with people, I ask them, what are their beliefs about themselves as a test taker? And what do they usually say is, I'm not a very good test taker. I'm a poor test taker. I'm a bad test taker. Right? That is their belief about themselves. That is their self-image. Right? And the way that we perceive ourselves and the beliefs that we have impact our behaviors and our performance. So one of the things I always work with them is, how do we look at changing those beliefs about yourself? How do we look at, obviously, changing that self-image of yourself when it comes to test taking? So let's talk about having a stance when we go in to take a test, kind of a test-taking stance. And the three things that I look at is, first, kind of having a target, having a goal. What are your goals when it comes to test taking? And I think goals are really important to have, yet I also think it's important that they're realistic. Right? I think a lot of time people have goals that are, I need to be perfect, I need to have straight A's, when really the reality is that that's unrealistic, which then at times increases that anxiety. So I think it's really important that you have realistic goals, but you do have those goals when it comes to testing. The second thing is we need to be able to identify positive self-talk. We are highly suggestible individuals, especially to the things that we say to ourselves. And usually when we start to experience test anxiety, it's very interesting what I hear people say to themselves. Right? So I think part of it is making sure that you have 3 or 4 statements that you're saying to yourself stated in positive terms that are going to help with that. And I also think it's positive images. What are the things that you want to be imagining or have images of that are obviously going to bring down that anxiety, and having that prepared. So one of the things that I'm going to get you to do, if you would, is just take the next 2 or 3 minutes here. And what I do is I give this to a lot of individuals that I work with, and I get them to write down what would be their target, their goal for the next test they're going to be preparing for taking, and then list 2 or 3 positive self-talk statements that they could use. So when they start to experience that test anxiety, they could refer to, right? So it may be, a statement would be, I'm prepared and confident, right? I'm calm and I'm relaxed, right? And images, it may be an image that at times people use, at times is kind of just a special place. It could be a time or beach, it could be family members, whoever would give them that calming feeling, okay? So if you would, take a moment, put down your goal for the next test that you would take realistically, put down 2 or 3 statements, positive statements that you could use, and then maybe 1 or 2 images that you would find helpful and useful.